This is ogforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention three things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Paya. Paya offers Acumatica users a suite of industry-leading payment orchestration tools. Far beyond native Acumatica payments, Paya enables EMV NFC terminals for countersale. They offer a frictionless customer portal through their click-to-pay solution, and they support most e-commerce platforms and point-of-sale solutions used with Acumatica, such as One Retail and AcuPOS. And best of all, omni-channel reconciliation is available for all their solutions. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is Aldrich Web Solutions. Are you a distributor using Acumatica, yet struggling with an e-commerce fit? US-based Aldrich Web Solutions out of Marion, Illinois, has 2 decades of experience helping distributors find success online. Our team of experts built the integration, creating websites that work effortlessly with Acumatica. With our reputation for swift customer service and meticulous attention to detail, we are the perfect fit for distributors needing online solutions. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. I mean guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Friday, March 15th, 2024, and this is episode number 130. You can find related links on the episode page at augforums.com/episode 130. Today I'm talking with Laura Barber about her journey from Solomon support to Acumatica implementation consulting. Hey Laura, thanks for joining today.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
And normally Laura uses her speakers and her onboard mic on her computer for calls, but she has gotten all decked out in a fancy headset. Your audio sounds great. You are prepared, I can tell. Thanks for doing that.
Yes, sir.
So, I always like to get the brief origin story of all of our guests, where you grew up, where you went to school, how you got into the world of mid-market ERP. And with you, I think it'll be more than the brief origin story, because I think that's part of what we want to talk about. When we ran into each other at the Acumatica Summit, I guess a little over a month ago, I didn't realize that you had spent so much time at Solomon Software, which, for those who don't know, I've done previous episodes on this. I did one with John Howell, who is one of the 3 original founders at Acumatica, and who also was heavily involved there at Solomon Software, based out of Findlay, Ohio. And even Mike C., the CTO of Acumatica, has Solomon roots. So there's this Solomon connection to Acumatica. And so I always like hearing more about Solomon. And so, yeah, I think We'll spend a little more time on your background here, but yeah, maybe you could start off with your personal background, then we'll kind of get into your experience with Solomon Support.
Well, I'm happy to do that, Tim. Um, I have a lot of stories, and some of them are long, so you may be sorry you asked, but
I like long stories. That's why I like this long form podcast. Bring it on. Bring it on.
I grew up in a small town in Ohio called Kenton with a K. It's in northwest Ohio, on a farm, and that means that I do know how to milk a cow. Yes, I do. My parents had 4 children. I'm the second of four. And what they told us was, we don't have money to send you all to school. So if you're thinking about college, you better study. Okay. And I took that challenge on. I'm the only one of my siblings who went on to school. Um, I didn't have a lot of money. And so what I did was live with mom and dad and drove to Lima, a nearby city, where I went to school first, a year at Ohio State Lima campus. And then when my scholarships ran out, I switched over to Lima Technical College because it was cheaper. And I finished Lima Technical College with an associate's degree in accounting. Um, as my graduation approached, I started to look in the newspaper at the one ads, because in 1990, that's how we got jobs.
Those were those like paper based things with information on them, and
Yes.
the print would come off on your fingers.
It would come to your door or your front stoop or your mailbox, and you would open it up, and it was a newspaper. Yes, in the on the back pages, classified ads, there was an ad for technical support, and I was 20 years old, and I did not know what technical support was. We did have a computer in our home, but it was really more of a word processor, and I had done some of my papers on it. I I applied because I had the right degree. The ad said you had to have either an associate's or a bachelor's in accounting, finance, or computers. And there I sat with my newly minted, not even, I wasn't even out of school actually. I had a few months to go when I was doing this job search, maybe February of 1990. I got in the door for an interview, and I remember the funniest question they asked me on that interview was, if you wrecked your friend's car, how would you tell them?
Wow, that's a good question. I like that.
And the lady's name was Elaine. Elaine asked me that, and she became my supervisor while I was working in. So I was hired before I graduated. That means in the mornings I was driving over to Lima to school, and then after school I was driving to Findlay, where Solomon Software was based, for afternoons in training. And my training looked something like someone handing me a stack of software guides, because they came printed in 3-ring binders, and there was one for GL and one for AP and one for AR, like that. So I studied. I had to read the whole collection. Um, so I started working in support when I was 20 years old, and still living at my parents' house in Kenton. So I did go on. I did go on to
But
finish
I've
my
got to say real
bachelor's
quick,
degree. Yes.
I really like that you included the interview question because I've always been impressed with Solomon Software. Not not so much as a software, a lot of software out there, but as a company. Like even I've heard the story about it being the idea kind of came together at a Bible study and like just the yeah. Anyways, and John Howell talked about kind of pioneering the idea of selling through accounting firms, and so yeah, the softer side of Solomon. I like hearing stories about that. So thank you for that interview question. But yeah,
Am I
sorry. Go
allowed to
ahead.
ask you a question?
Sure,
H-
sure, yeah.
how would you answer that?
Oh, on the fly? Oh boy. I guess you have to answer on the fly, huh? If you wreck your friend's car, I I'm I would answer it very fact first. Like I like leading with the bad news, so I would have just said I completely totaled your car and then try to figure out what to say after that. That's how I do it. How did do you remember how you answered it?
I do. I said I flipped it around from what you though. I put the good part first. Don't worry, I'm going to pay for this.
That's smart. That's a good
If it
idea.
takes me the rest of my life.
That's a good answer too. Boy, what a
And
yeah, that's a good
it
answer.
took me a while to catch on to why did they ask me that? Um, well, I mean, the answer. I mean, do you know the answer to that? Do you want to guess that?
Well, it sounds like you nailed it, which is basically, are you taking responsibility for
Oh,
it, right?
I did get
That's my take.
I did get the
But
job.
why?
What after years of experience and thinking this over, it was because the databases and the hard drives back then, you sometimes lost everything, and I would be the one that
Oh,
had to tell the customer. And
interesting.
yeah, that's and there was training back then for us on how to handle angry customers. Um, we had I mean one thing that I do is I ap- I don't apologize for something I didn't cause, but I do sort of apologize, and I do everything I can to make the customer feel better. I would say, I'm sorry this happened to you.
Yeah, I think
uh,
you can empathize without apologizing, right?
Exactly. And here's what I can do to help. Here's what I can do to rebuild. Here's what I can do to to answer your question. But I never apologize for something that I did not directly cause or do myself. But I do want those customers to know that I am here to help you, and I'll do whatever you want, and whatever I can, to help your situation.
Very cool. Yeah, so that I hadn't thought about the losing the database side of that question. Interesting. Very interesting. So yeah, sorry. I
Yes.
didn't mean to get hung up too much on that, but
No,
yeah, go ahead.
that's
I'm
okay.
sure
That's okay.
you got a ton of stuff from support. Go ahead.
We were a few things. We were taught about how to cool people off. Like it is okay. These people. I mean, you think about it. If you think about the way support works today, right? I think it is a piece of cake today compared to how it was when I first started. And by that, I mean, the call would come in to the front desk where Gail was our the phone operator, and she had all those plugs in front of her, and all the calls would come in, and they would be routed to support based on a couple of questions the users were asked when they called in. And I know we were separated. um, I'm sure it's much more elaborate today, the way they separated and route the calls, but it was single user and network. Those were the choices.
Well, because that was the software, right? There were two different software solutions there.
It meant you have one user who runs it on one desk, or you're running it on a server somewhere in the office, and everybody can access it. And that went to different groups of people, but we did not separate it necessarily by what kind of question you had. We were responsible for knowing the GL and the inventory and the distribution and the report writer and the financial report writer and all of that. We all had to know. And of course we didn't know in the beginning. And so what do you do when you don't know? Well, we were to get the details and then go ask someone, which meant putting down my phone and running over to a supervisor to ask. And we would queue up outside the supervisor's cubicles to ask questions. And if it was a really really difficult question, I had to go find the person who was the supervisor of inventory to ask that person a question, and sometimes they had to take the call, which meant he or she might be on the phone, and I'm putting a paper in front of them that says, could you take this inventory call, blah blah, whatever, and trying to get this organized. Or I would take a message and then write it down and slip it to that person to call back later.
Interesting.
And it was 1990. Our error messages, I mean, there was no internet. Our error messages were in a binder in numeric order. And so each section of our support had, a binder. And if you had an error message, you got the number from the customer. It generally had a number in front of it. And you could go look it up and see, get some help that way. I was expected to do 30 calls a day. And I have a certain type of personality that I'm going to get 30 every day, and I'm going to do higher than 30. That's how I operate sometimes. Um,
What I mean, is it really up to you, or do they just come in?
they
Like,
would
or you just
just
have to
come in.
stay
Your
there
phone would
longer?
just ring. The operator could tell, or the system could tell who was available. We couldn't tell how many people were waiting, and they weren't given any kind of wait time. So sometimes they waited a long time in high volume situations. But no, you'd be sitting at your desk and it would just ring, and sometimes it'd be a few minutes between calls, and sometimes not. Everything was done over the phone. We could not see our customer's screen. That's what I mean when I say how easy they have
Oh,
it.
that's a big one. Yeah,
First
that's a
of
big one.
all, yeah, we can't see what they're doing. You had to use your imagination. I had a PC where I could pull up the Solomon, and I could go to the same screen they were talking about. But I also, over time, just had them all pictured in my brain. But I couldn't actually. Sometimes when you needed a screenshot, people could fax you. I mean, the screens could be printed, and it came out like a bunch of X's, and then they could fax that to us. We had a fax machine. Sometimes people mailed us Polaroids.
That's awesome. That's a real screenshot.
But we didn't have, it was all by phone. We couldn't see their screen. And today, I don't even call support. You can't even call them. So everything is with email. So before they even start, they already know the question. They could do a little research. You know what I mean? That's why I say it is a piece of cake compared to what we were doing in 1990.
As antiquated as it sounds, I gotta ask you, when you say queuing up outside a supervisor's cubicle, comparing that to what you do now, which working remotely, what was there in the, looking for things that were better, the good old days, did you feel like you were more part of a team being in person in an office like that, or does it not matter to you that you're working remotely?
Well, I don't know if you realize this, but I am the first person ever to work from home in the whole world. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I worked in Solomon support for about a year and a half, and then I took a job with a company located in Connecticut, and I moved out of Ohio, and I moved to Connecticut. Now I worked there for about 3 years, and I decided I wanted to move back home to Ohio. And my boss at that time said, "Well, we don't have anyone to do support for us here, Laura." We had more than 200 Solomon customers in the New York City area, and I was supporting all of them, frontline support. I was teaching training classes and doing, bits of consulting, but mostly training and handling frontline support and some office chores like, bookkeeping and vacuuming. It was a small office.
Never
There
heard
were
those
only
2.
three of us.
Never heard those 2 put together.
So when I decided to move home, my boss said, "Well, could we just like forward the phone to you during business hours for a while you find something new?" And I said, "Yes." And I started working from home in 1993. There was
Wait,
still
so the
no internet.
Connecticut in Connecticut, you were working for Solomon still, or a different company?
No. No, I worked
Different
for a
company.
Solomon partner.
Ah, partner. Okay, so you were still in the Solomon ecosystem. Okay,
I
gotcha, gotcha,
was. Yes.
gotcha.
I worked for a Solomon partner. I haven't answered your question really. Um, I felt like I feel like at home I'm a lot more productive. There's a lot fewer interruptions
Sure,
than
sure.
when I'm in an office of any kind. I don't mind it. The hardest thing for me is staying current, because I've worked in maybe 8 different partner organizations in my career, and some are better than others at helping us stay up to date and also at just communicating. So in some companies I felt more disconnected, in some companies more connected. Like right now where I am at Clear Systems, I think that we're very communicative, we're very teamwork oriented, and I think that's just the nature of the beast. Some groups of people are more outgoing and some are less outgoing. I don't know how to explain it, but
But it
That's
sounds
been
like
my
you don't miss the
experience.
social part. Like the I guess I'm more thinking of like the mental health, the psychological impact. Sounds like you've been working remotely for a long time, and so maybe,
A long
you
time.
can't think back that far to what it was like before, but yeah, or maybe, it being in an office at least was a good way to ramp up. It might have been hard to ramp up on those 3 ring binders remotely, but I guess I'm looking
Yeah.
for some amount of, is there a benefit to being in the office? Maybe for you, there's not. Sounds like you're more productive, but like that you kind of made this point that like staying current, that's not a productive side of you, right? So you're more productive maybe on your own, but like learning new information, I feel like for me at least, is better done in a group, because it's not a productive activity. But that's just my take. I don't know if your take on it.
Yes, I mean, it's almost 100% going through the Acumatica website and watching their videos and doing, and there, I just find that there's many things I'd rather do, like help someone. So I am probably slow on the uptake of new features and things like that, and it's helpful to me to if it's in one of my assignments, basically, so I can learn it and bill it at the same time. That helps me. But when COVID came around and suddenly everybody's working at home, I did have advice. Um, I have office hours, and I don't answer my phone outside office hours. I don't sit at my desk. I'm not in my office. What you see around me, this is real. I get out of the house, and that was the advice I gave my coworkers when 2020 came around. Was you need to get out of the house. Whatever time you were doing commuting before, that's now your outside time. Get
That's
out of the
really good
house.
advice. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
very
and you don't
quickly.
necessarily mean like go travel somewhere. You just mean you could walk the neighborhood, just
Oh
something to get
yes,
out of the walls. Yeah. Yeah.
yes. Get
That's really
outside the house, get some fresh air, take a walk, take a run, go ride your bike. Do something outside the house. And that's my social life. Um, I have two very good friends, and I met them both on the running trail here where I live. Um, They, yes, I told them it very quickly becomes living at work if you don't have boundaries. And a boundary can mean physical, like closing your office door, and a boundary can be on the clock, and it can also be on your phone. Um,
Well, it sounds like you recommend all 3 if possible. You have boundary in terms of hours, and you have boundary in terms of a dedicated physical space. That's what you found for work.
Correct.
I like that. That's really good advice. Can I also ask you on email, like when you say your phone, are you specifically talking about just phone calls, or do you also not check email outside of those hours?
I don't. I don't check
Wow,
emails. Now,
that's
my
hard to
boss,
do. But
there is like one or two people at work who have my cell phone, my private cell phone number, because I always say, I'm not handing that out to my coworkers because it's not Clear's phone, it's mine. And I was
I
also
love it.
probably the last person to get a cell phone. I've only had mine for about 4 years.
Oh, I love
Um,
it. I love it.
I didn't want people reaching me outside of business hours. Um, it could very quickly become your whole life. Like you can't get
Yeah,
away from work. You don't have any downtime. Um, so yes, that's. I don't.
interesting. No, I
If
love that
somebody goes
advice, and
live, I have. Go ahead. Sorry.
well, I just gotta say, I love that advice because the illusion is that you get more done. I don't think it's true though. I think you get more done if you set boundaries. Personally,
You need
yeah,
rest.
because yeah, you really do. That's good.
When one of our customers is cutting over to their new system, that is the rare circumstance. It happens about 2 or 3 times a year when I will take my personal cell phone and I will give it either to the customer or to the person leading the project. If I'm second on a project, if I'm not leading the project, I'll give it out and I'll say, this is for emergencies. Emergencies
And then, do you
are,
find what
there's a list.
emergencies are? I love it.
Go Live Weekend actually is one of them. Go Live Weekend. You can't get payroll out. Your system is down. Right. Those are, today we used to have, like you can't print checks is pretty close up there. You can't invoices, but even before you can't print checks. But yes. I'm
Yeah,
elusive
there's a list.
outside of business hours.
There's a list, and it's a short list.
That's right. That's right.
No, this is good. I think we quickly jumped into modern day, and we're able to do it on the heels of 1990s. And I think there's a lot that just hasn't changed, right? We're still human beings, and yeah. Maybe you could also, harkening back to the solemn days. Any, like, you talked a little bit about, you were trained how to deal with angry customers. Do you have any advice there from things both you learned at Solomon, but then also in the real world of how
Hmm.
that training benefited you?
Yes. I always try to agree with the customer, even if they're wrong. I'm not always right, so they're probably not always right either. But I find something to agree on, like, I agree this is really inconvenient for you. Yes, you're correct. And I also think, and then I put in the right answer. You know what I mean? If they're like, maybe they're close, or maybe even if I think they're wrong, I'll go, yes. And then I'll say what I think we should do next, or something like that. So try to be agreeable, even while you're disagreeing. There are gentler ways to do it.
So not yes but yes and. I like that. That's good. Huh.
Yes. There's a few times where I mean, maybe once when someone was angry. I mean, these people had to hold for a long time, and then they get someone who doesn't really know the answer. I mean, they were sometimes angry. You had to say, I mean, uh, if I couldn't calm them down just with my normal, these things I'm telling you about. One time I had to say to someone, "Do you want to just call back when you're cooled off? Maybe I could call you in like an hour." um, because we're really not making progress here. And I know you're angry. Um, one other thing I'm just popped into my mind, and that is, we were taught, this has to do with not being able to see their screens, like, don't lead the witness, like an attorney would, right? Um, when we ask them questions, like the way we asked the questions had to be open ended. You didn't just say, this box is checked, right? Like on the screen, you had to leave it open ended. That post to GL box, is that checked or not? And that, because people would tell you what they thought you wanted to hear, and it
Yeah, that makes sense.
caused trouble getting to the answer. I did have one customer one time. This is in the time that I lived in New York, and I think their company culture was a little bit rough because he used the F word a lot, and I was uncomfortable with that, being a country bumpkin and all of that. But I found it within myself to say, "Excuse me, sir, you're speaking to a lady."
I love it. That's awesome. I love it.
And you are going to have to watch your language when you call here if you want me to answer your Solomon questions.
That is
And
awesome.
and you know what? He was very well behaved after that.
That's
I
awesome.
never had to say another word.
Wow, this is good stuff. Even your open-ended part has me thinking, like, that is huge right there, because it's so easy, especially in support. And I want to transition into, your not jump, but your transition from support to consulting now, or quite a while ago. But the it's so easy, especially in support, to be prescriptive, right? You're like, I just gotta, like a doctor, I just gotta write the prescription for the medicine I think you need, without really understanding the problem. And that open-ended part, being able to really do that genuinely, is challenging to do, I think, because a lot of times you just jump into where you think you need to go without spending an uncomfortable amount of time listening and understanding what's really going on, right? Do you find that to be true, or am I just making that up?
I think it is sometimes hard to understand what people are asking. And I used to say, I've been in support long enough that I know what you're going to ask before you ask it.
Sure.
And I understand what you're asking, even when it's not stated very clearly because you're not quite sure how to state or you're not sure what's going on. And so I think that a lot of it comes with experience. But I am reminded, you and I met at Summit this year, but my first Solomon conference was in Columbus, Ohio, in about probably 93, maybe 94. And I heard a speaker there who said something. He told a story. Do I have time to go into? I'll repeat the
Yeah.
story, and I think it'll
Yeah.
make a
Let's hear
good
it.
point here on
Yeah.
topic. Um, I heard a speaker at one of the keynote speeches. They had a gentleman who was speaking, and he was talking about a golf outing that he took with his wife and some buddies and their wives. Now, I don't golf. I don't know anything about golf, but his stories was that there were about eight of them, I think, four couples playing golf, and so they had decided that they were going to play something called best ball. Do you know what that means?
I
No.
don't know golf either. No.
Okay. Well, he explained what best ball is all eight of you, you whack the ball and it goes flying, and then you look at where all the balls landed. And the one that did the best and is closest to the hole, you all pick up your balls and move to where that one is. That's the best hit, I guess. And then from there, you move on, and it allows your golf game to go faster because everyone gets elevated to the best golfers, um, his result. And then you all play on from there. And he said that, um, wouldn't it be wonderful if we played, actually, one of the wives, his wife or one of the wives said, excuse me, I think we need to play worse ball. My ball is the worst, and I want everyone to continue the game from where my ball is. And the man speaking said, suddenly, all of us are trying to help her make a better shot. And then he said, wouldn't it be wonderful if this game, worse ball, could be applied to everything we do in life? And this stuck with me for my whole life. And when I get a question from a customer, I try to answer not just what they're plainly asking, but I think about what's going to come next. And is he going to have a question next about the next step? I think about, does he really understand? And my goal is always to elevate that customer, to teach them so that they can be self sufficient. Um, Basically, I mean, on a personal level, I want to do well enough that you don't call me back. And if you call
Sure.
me back, I don't want to hear that same question again.
Sure. That's
but
success.
but isn't that a fantastic concept? Worse ball. And if we all went out into that customer and everybody looked at their team and said, you know what? Laura is struggling to keep up with the new features. She seems like she's just not that interested. She would rather go, chat on the phone with someone who has a question. So maybe the rest of us who are, engineers and all those smarter people who don't have any trouble grasping bank feeds and all these new features that come out could kind of sit with Laura and boost her up and elevate her bank feed experience. I
I
think that
love
it's
that.
a good lesson that we could all help others with.
I think that goes back to the earlier thing we talked about, which is that you can be more productive on your own, but in a sense, you kind of need a group to, maybe not help you learn, but just keep you going on a learning path. At least that's the case for me, and that's why I like at least digital communities as a way to stay connected. And we can talk about your involvement in the community on the community.acumatica.com. But I think that, yeah, that worst ball, I feel like that you kind of need that to, I don't know what it is. There's just something, at least for me, where you need others to keep you focused on learning. Otherwise, you just get obsessed with productivity. That's just me, though.
Yes.
Do you find then that the Acumatica community website helps with that, or then maybe some of the things you do at Clear Systems there? I don't know if we want to transition to that now, but what do you think?
Yes. I started out asking a few questions on the community. I probably had something a client needed or something I needed to configure, and I was having trouble or an error message, and I decided to ask something on the community. And at first, maybe for 6 months, I didn't answer anything. Um, I would just go there when I wanted something faster than support, or maybe for some reason I felt like um, I like to do my homework before I call support, and maybe that was part of my homework is to just research on the community. I always search the help. And one day while I was on the community looking for something, I saw an unanswered question that I knew the answer to. I thought I knew the answer to something like that. And so I was very nervous about being wrong, of course, in front of thousands of people. But my drive to answer people, which just comes from the career I've had, with mostly what I've done is support. I answered the question, and um, I think I got it right. I can't remember even what the first question was at this point, but did my best to answer the customer. And eventually, a few days later, I was awarded with the best answer. And the system emails you when that happens. Um, your email, you get an email every time someone responds to something you've tried to answer. And I got an email, and as I got more active, and I thought, well, that was fun. I'm going to see if I can answer anything else, and I would try a few more questions. Um, I started to realize I'm getting points for this. I don't know what points are, but suddenly I could see that I'm in, like, 167th place overall. And I'm competitive. What can I say? I like to help people, number one, and number two, I have a competitive gene inside me that wants to do better, wants to do more, wants to go faster, and all of that. I'm driven in a certain way. And so I started to look at the list, and I thought, huh, I don't want to be 167th. I looked at Naveen. Let me just call him out. Naveen is the superstar on Acumatica community. And I said to myself, he has helped over 300 people. He had more than 300 best answers when I arrived. And I just said, I want to be like him. I mean, I want to be super helpful. And I think I can do it because I have a support background gives you a wide range of knowledge that's kind of shallow. I know
That's a good
only
way of
about
putting
what
it. Yeah,
what people ask me. If nobody asked about a particular field on the screen, then I have to look it up just like everybody else. I don't know everything. I'm not an engineer. I'm not that smart. I would say I'm average. I'm average intelligence, but way above average helpful.
I like that. Yeah, I think that also speaks to the empathy side of things. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of times engineers are the worst at interfacing with people. Not helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, what you're describing on the community is it sounds like the dopamine hit, that you hear about media companies tapping into. It sounds like there's something similar going on the community forums, the badges and things.
Totally, totally. I only play one game on my phone. My son introduced me to nonograms. I had to put it away. I couldn't stop. I was like,
I've been playing
dude.
Fortnite with my son, and it's addictive. Yeah, and I've been trying to think through why is it? What are they doing to my brain that does this to me? But there's a similar thing. There's like points, and yeah, it's just like one more type of mindset. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yes, you could see the flag ahead. If you do 3 more games, you get this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, I mean, there's a little bit of obsessive compulsive disorder going on, I'm sure, but if
sure,
it's helping more people, then I'm good with that.
sure, sure. Yeah, and it's also, kind of bringing it back to the learning side, the learning versus productivity, and I don't know the details. I'm sure it's different parts of our brain, but do you find that being on the community helps put you in a learning mindset, or no? Is that
Oh,
maybe a third
yes.
thing that's going on?
Yes, I do learn. I mean, there are some areas where I don't try very hard to learn, because I feel like it's above what I can do, and that would be programming. To me,
Sure,
it's just I'm wasting my time, and sometimes, I mean, there have been a few times where I've tried to answer, and it's usually like the weekend, like, right, somebody has a question, it's sitting there more than 24 hours. I feel sorry for them. I think, well, and I'll try in my non-programming way to say, did you look here? Did you try that? Or I'll take their question and I'll just Google it, and say, I found this over here. Even if it's outside the community, maybe it could help you. Because my drive to help is stronger than my knowledge that I don't know programming. but but yes, I do. I avoid certain areas, but I have subscribed to, because on the community you can you can be passive, or you can be like fully involved. And passive means when you feel like it, you might go there and see what's unanswered and try to help. But if you're fully involved, then like I do, I subscribe to the areas where I think I can answer. Finance, I could do some distribution, I could do some inventory, I could do some reporting, things like that. I sign up for that, and that means it comes into my email, and then I have it directed to a separate folder. So I could tell that there's just a box where these are the ones that came from the community, and they light up black. And during the day, most of the time I answer before work and after work or over lunch. But sometimes I have time between meetings. I'll try to squeeze somebody in. I can tell where they are, and I just try to answer as many as I can. Um, I usually get into trouble when I'm trying to do it between meetings, though, because I get rushed, and then sometimes I give an incorrect or incomplete answer, like I didn't really think it through.
sure. I've experienced that. Yep, I know what you're talking about.
It's a lot better before work for me, because I feel like there's plenty of time to go check check my work and get a good screenshot. I like screenshots because I feel like they're going to understand what I'm saying better if I take a screenshot, highlight the items, and stick it up there. I think I like to think that there's more pictures in the answers, since I kind of I have one in almost every answer that I post.
Oh, I'm with you there. A picture is worth 1,000 words, isn't it? Yeah, and kind of going back to, boy, how you did that without the ability, if someone had to fax it in or Polaroid it in. Oh, that would be so much more difficult, and not being able to see it. Oh, that'd be painful.
Seriously, I can sign into every customer's website. I
Oh, yeah, that's
can go to the
so nice,
document they're asking about, right?
so nice.
I mean, it is cake. It's cake work.
It's interesting you say before work because we've had Candy Beatty on before, and we talked about the community. I think she's right behind Naveen on like all time posts. You might be right behind Candy. I'm not sure. Do you know? I don't
I
know on the
do.
all time list. But yeah, where are you at?
I just passed 800 correct answers, and Candy is sitting somewhere between 450 and 500.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay,
And
okay.
I'm creeping up on Naveen, and he kind of knows it.
So
I
watch out, Naveen.
I met him in person just this week for the first time.
Oh, really?
Yes, Chris, the community manager, invited us, the three of us. There's a new. He wanted feedback on the community and how to improve it, and we have some ideas. I don't know if I'm allowed to really, I mean, he didn't say don't talk about it, but um, we have some new ideas about a library section where maybe, all these people posting corrected reports or corrected imports. I think we should be
Yeah, yeah.
using those attachments people freely stick out there should be part of a, you know, your mileage may vary section on these because we don't know what version they are.
Right, right.
You might want
Yeah.
to download it and look at it. It may help you type library of here are the import scenarios that various people. So that's one of the things we're thinking about. But anyway, I met Naveen in person and I told him what an inspiration. He's the reason I said I wanted to be like him. I think he has taken some time off because otherwise I never would have been able to make up 300. I mean, when I got here, he had 300 questions, but I think he's been doing other things. And right now, I am about 40 best answers behind him. I'm in second place.
Oh, you're close. Wow. Interesting. So, all right. So, come back to the morning stuff. So, yeah, you, Candy, Naveen. I mean, you're the three of you, and then you were on a call together. Yeah, you guys know the community. And Candy made the point that most of the time that she spends in the community is in the morning before work. So, I think it's interesting that you find similarly for you. That's the brain space time for that, where you're able to kind of
Hmm.
be clear and focused, and that's interesting. I noticed that. Hmm.
I get up earlier than I want to most days. um, So I'm up at 5 a.m. with my coffee, and it's quiet, dark time, and I come in to see what's going on in the community as I drink my morning Joe.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So community involvement, the community.acumatica.com. You're closing in on Naveen there. It's a great way to learn things. What about? Can you talk? Actually, before we go here, could you fill us in on? So Solomon, we were in the 1990s. Now we've jumped into like today. In between there, was it right from Solomon to Acumatica for you? And when was that, or was there something in between?
Yes, I um, I was working. I mean, I don't know if you want me to say names, but I was working for a company where I was still doing the support, and the boss there wanted me to learn Acumatica, and I said, "Who's going to support your Solomon customers?" Because
You can say
I
names if it doesn't bother you. I love hearing details. Yeah.
I worked for Nextview in New York City. Well, they aren't in New York City, but most of their customers are. Um, we were located in Stamford, Connecticut, and Dan Schwartz was my boss for years, and he wanted me to get into Acumatica, and I said, Dan, uh, who's going to support your customers? Because I'm still solid more than 40 hours a week taking the phone calls from all the clients and doing all the Solomon support. And he said something like, what are you doing at night?
uh,
And so what I ended up doing was resigning my position, and I went to AIM Solutions where their customers didn't know me, and I wasn't supporting their Solomon per se, and they already had many. AIM Solutions was in earlier into Acumatica than Nextview was. So at AIM Solutions, I had like 2 months to just sit here and do the Acumatica training and shadow other people's Acumatica, and I didn't have to worry about I didn't have wall to wall calls already from. So for me, that was the only way that I could accommodate the learning of Acumatica was to shut off that fire hose of support that was coming at me from the old customers. So it allowed
I,
me to segue.
I've heard this story so many times. Yeah, I call it the tar baby. Like it's from a cash flow standpoint, it's awesome, the old customers, right? But there's a technology shift happening. You need to pick the new one. And the only way to do it is to resign. Like I don't know any way around it, right? Unfortunately, because of exactly that. The fire hose. I like that way of putting it. Yeah, I've heard that story so many times. To make that transition, it's a rip off the band-aid. Otherwise it never happens, right?
Yep, exactly. And it worked out well. I mean, I did find it, I did find I grew with AIM Solutions. I'm not there anymore, but I have moved around quite a bit for various reasons. I mean, I stayed here in Florida where I live, but had different employers.
And when was that? Like that shift where you then went to AIM, around what year was that?
It was 2015.
Okay.
I had started on the online learning with Acumatica in 2013, so that's when I first started trying to learn it. But
Oh,
I
same
ended
as
up,
me. Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
interesting. I didn't realize
and
that.
those are my first certifications. But when you used to have to get on the phone with them and they checked your work and all that, yeah.
Yes, yes. Oh, so same for me. It was 2013, like as a hobby, I call it, and then 2015 when it actually became a job for me. Interesting.
That's exactly what it was. Yes.
Interesting.
And I thought I might even do my whole career. I went back to school to get my bachelor's in the late 90s, and then I went back to school again in my 40s to get because I needed to refresh my computer skills, I thought. So I ended up with an associate's in IT in 2012, and then moved into Acumatica.
Oh, very
So
cool.
forgot where I was going
So,
with that.
oh, sorry. You were talking about 2013 to 2015.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask you this. This might not be where you're going, but you went back to school 2012, got an associate's, but then 2013 when you started learning Acumatica to 2015, that being like a hobby. I'm
Yes.
interested to hear your experience with the school side versus just learning Acumatica as a hobby. Where do you feel like you learned more?
I thought I would always be with Solomon actually, but I the more I saw Acumatica, the more I loved it, and so it was an easy segue, and possibly because some of the people who formed Acumatica, I it was similar in many ways in the beginning to the way the
Right,
Solomon looked, right?
right.
So that made that easier. Can you
But
repeat
I
your?
guess, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at is your experience doing official school in 2012 and getting an associate's there, that learning path. If you compare that to the more ad hoc hobby learning path of learning Acumatica between 2013 and 2015, one's like formal learning and you get a degree. The other one, yeah, you have some certifications, but it's largely, in my opinion, more of an informal learning path. On which path do you feel like you learned more? Or which one did you enjoy more, maybe?
I enjoyed school in person more.
Ah, okay.
Yes, even though I was by far the oldest, raised the average age of that classroom right up.
Raise the mean at least.
Yes. Yes. But I also loved it because I was going to school at night and working days, and I had classes like website design, which was just eye-opening, in 2012, 2011, to see how they do build that and build some myself. I mean, ultimately, I was a superstar, let's say, in SQL Server class.
Right.
And everything I learned in like the Microsoft Office, I remember taking so much back. The things I learned to do in Excel. Um, when I first learned Excel, it was called Lotus, and it was on a DOS machine. Um, I eventually moved to Excel, and then but taking an Excel class, I learned to use the functions a lot better. That it was immediately these things I was learning in night school were immediately useful. Um, Really elevated my SQL knowledge, even though I knew a lot of SQL. I don't think I really understood things like joins and views and those things. I mean, everything those people taught me at night, I was going to work the next day and learn and using them. Where a young student, I think it's not so in context as it is for an older student. Um,
Sure. Yeah, you don't it's more academic. Yeah, you don't have the like, oh, this is useful right away. Sure, sure.
yes, yes, I was in the back of the classroom going, "Oh, I can
I had
use
that
that."
question yesterday. Yeah. Interesting. No, I'm actually there's this theme I feel like that keeps coming up, right? This remote versus in person, this productivity versus learning parts of our brain, and you enjoy the in person learning better than the just ad hoc on your own. I think that's
I
yeah,
do.
I love that. I
I
love
think
that.
I get bored.
Yeah, right. And there's a motivation as being able to maintain it, right? Keep it going. The endurance slash motivation side that in person you just can't beat it, right?
Yes.
Interesting. I think part of the reason why I'm asking these questions is, like I built this video training course on generic inquiries in Acumatica, and A lot of people have taken it remotely, but I'm also getting pretty serious about doing it in person here in Columbus in the fall. And so that's partly why I'm picking your brain on this because I've
I would
realized the
love to
same thing.
come.
Like just forcing yourself to sit down in a room with other people for a couple of days. Sometimes that's the only way to get it done, right? From a motivation standpoint. So yeah,
I
for
would
sure.
like it. I think it would be a hard sell at work because I already know a lot about inquiries. And in fact, I always qualify mine though. I teach generic inquiry for beginners. Because once you get into a little programming, you know how I feel about it, right? I'm gonna say, well, if you have a question and it starts with if, I'm going to transfer you over to one of our engineers or programming people.
Yeah, but you definitely have a troubleshooting mindset, right? Which I think
Yeah, I
is
do.
the majority of programming, right? I think a lot of people they can write code, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're thinking through the business side of things. You definitely have the business side, and
It's my own
on
mental
that,
wall, I think. But you're right. You're right. I could take a question and um, I would not. I would be uncomfortable in, say, an open forum where people can just ask me questions. But I'm very good with reading your question, thinking about it, and coming back to you in like 2 or 3 days with three different options of how you might approach an answer. I can do that very well. Um,
yeah, and I think that's the hard part. I guess where I'm going with that is that there's a lot of people who can write code, but being able to architect something, knowing you have multiple paths, presenting options, and then deciding on a path, that's the consultative side of things. And I think that's the, building the blueprint for the developer to then go execute, I feel like is the harder skill to find. And so before I ask you this, quick time check. We're coming to the top of the hour. Are you okay to go another 10, 15 minutes?
sure. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so, we kind of talked about transition from Solomon to Acumatica. We've talked about, um, a lot of old versus new stuff, how it was in the 90s versus now. But what about your personal transition from you've talked about support a lot. Now you're doing ERP implementations. Can you talk about your transition there? Did that happen at AIM Solutions? Was that a quick rip off the band-aid or was that more of a gradual thing? Maybe talk about that transition for you personally.
At AIM Solutions, I was never the leader of a project. Um, I'm a very good second because I understand what you're asking me to do and I know how to do it and I'll get it done on time. Um, and there's some areas where I'm more comfortable than others, like most people. Um, and so now I do lead projects. After I left AIM, I went to Acutech Partners, and there I felt like the leader of everything, even though it's not literally true. We were small organization. At the most, I had like 8 projects assigned to me, which was too many. Um, and I was leading the projects myself. And it was harder in an organization that small. When I got to the edges of my own knowledge and I didn't know how to do something, it didn't seem like there was backup. And then Accutech was eventually sold, and they were dissolved mainly because one of the partners died of COVID. And the outfall from that was his widow wanted to sell. So it was not a good situation, and it's nobody's fault. But um, it was a difficult place to work for these reasons because we were so small. We went through this hardship, and we're not able to grow because we were busy dissolving ourselves. So that and it was very hard. But I was leading projects there, and where I am now, I'm the leader on a couple of things, and I'm the second on a few things, and I'm learning that. Um, I really think I like to be the second. I think that I have everybody's back. You know what I mean? That is where I'm most comfortable. Now, I can lead a project, but where I don't like when somebody's late on something, I don't like to nag them. There's certain things that I feel like I might remind you once, but I'm not going to babysit you, and you know what I mean. Like, so there's for some reasons I think that that's my preference. I think would be to let someone else do that.
So if you were on the Chicago Bulls in the 1990s, you would identify with Scottie Pippen more than Michael Jordan.
Okay, I don't understand the reference, but I'm sure you're right.
Scottie Pippen was a huge part of why they were successful. Everyone gives the credit to Michael Jordan, but Scottie Pippen was like,
Yeah.
the assist person and the I got your back person.
I would
And
say
a
I'm
huge
not pushy enough to get
yeah,
out there and drive that project through because I don't want to,
yeah,
you know what I mean? I don't want to offend anybody. Although I will tell you if your language is too harsh. I just feel like, we're all adults here. I've asked you for something and you need to do the follow through. I can't manage your work.
yeah.
And
Project
that's where I
management
am.
is a lot of babysitting. I totally agree. I'm,
Yes.
but it sounds like so. Even though it sounds like you're, okay, say was it Acutech? What was the
Acutech in between
Acutech?
aim and yes.
So even though that was a difficult situation, I would call it like a trial by fire situation. I've
Yes.
heard this from a number of people, and I'm curious if you agree with it. Like, if you're going to make the transition from support to implementations, running projects, I don't know any way to do it other than trial by fire. Like, as long as you have someone else who can fall back on, you're just not going to do it. Do you feel like do you agree with that? Like in terms of you really giving that a shot, not by choice, it just kind of happened, and knowing that you like being, the second person on the project. Do you feel like that experience at Acutech really taught you that that for sure is something I don't want to do? And I guess, do you feel
Well,
like if someone really wanted to do it, they just have to jump in, or is there an easier way to kind of experiment with running projects?
I think a lot of people leave support because they get burned out. It's a lot. Um, but today it might not be so bad because they have so many resources that we didn't have, like an internet. Um, but it was bad when I was younger. That we had a lot of turnover. So when people left, I don't really know where they went. I mean, I only know my own transition. While I was at Acutech, I enjoyed being the leader of the projects until they got to be too many. I did enjoy it. I enjoy every customer. I love them. I love I love all my customers and I want to take care of them. So when I was the project leader and I was doing all of these things, I left Acutech. When I left Acutech, I was not thinking um, that was something I didn't want to do. Lead projects. That's something that's kind of come to me recently because now
And you still do it. It sounds like, yeah, you're
I'm
doing a little
doing
bit of
both
both.
at the
Yeah.
same time, and I'm realizing that. I think where I really excel is the projects where I'm the second. Um, just because I'm not pushy enough. I'm not. I have two children and I don't need any more. I mean, I hate to say that, but I don't. I don't like going. I don't. I'm making a comparison here that these people aren't children, but eh, and I know they have day jobs and they have a hard time, but I don't have it in me to pester you for what I need, and I just don't do it. And so my things tend to slide late because I'm not aggressive in that way. So
I'm totally with you there. I'm totally with you there. And it's also, for me at least, it's more of a juggling skill rather than a deep dive, always learning new things kind of a thing. I think part of what I like about, being on the implementation side, but doing the work rather than managing the work, is that you're always learning new things and you're expanding into new areas. Whereas project management is largely, in my opinion at least, it's kind of the same thing every time, and it's the babysitting, right? I don't know if
yes,
you agree with that.
I do like being a consultant. Number one, it is flat out easier than support. I mean, and now that I'm a consultant, I wonder why I was paid less as a support person than I am as a consultant when support
Interesting.
when support was so much harder. Um, And then the second thing that I have an appreciation for right now is the variety in the work. Because when you're doing support, there's no variety in your work. And I like to do things like write a report, write a GI, even though I might get stuck and have to ask for help on that one little programming part. I can do most of it myself. And I like, yes, learning how to give access rights to people and to do this and that and the other. There's a lot of variety, and that is more interesting.
Okay, I
Support has
like
a lot
that.
of variety, but it's different. It's
I like that.
pressure.
So I think I was trying to jump from support to project management. Let me change it. Let's talk about then the growth just from support to consulting. And like you said, you get paid more. You're I like how you're saying it's easier. Talk about that transition. Did that happen at AIM? Did that happen at Acutech? Where did that happen for you?
I became a consultant at AIM. And they were a pretty large enough organization that I was in on other people's. I shadowed people, so I was in a lot of meetings where I could learn things, and then I was handed off pieces like, um, I mean, we were converting our Solomon customers to Acumatica, and at that time I had my new IT degree and all my refreshed SQL Server knowledge, and what I did with it was go into their Solomon databases and pull out detail, and I would import into Acumatica a year or two worth of AP bills followed by the checks that paid them in an accurate way, and then pull the GL in through the GL and the AR invoice history and the payments through AR. This was before we had migration mode. Okay, didn't exist.
Right. You had to
And
back all that stuff out after you did it. Yeah.
and I was using SQL to pull out exactly what I needed and then importing it into Acumatica in a way that was correct and balanced and closed and we were offering that as a service to our clients. So I mean, Solomon is the only software I'd be able to do that with. I don't know Sage tables or anything like that, but we were very successful at it, and I really like that because I'm not on the phone. I'm working. It was me in a database. I guess I like database work. So that to me was interesting and fun. Was
And it sounds like you're so I guess also where I'm going with this, if someone, let's say, who's in a support role currently, right, and has kind of walked up to the diving board of consulting. I've seen this before also. Like, I can tell they're really good, but they're used to support where like you get an answer and you know it 100%. Whereas consulting is much more of a gray skill in my opinion. And it's scary because you're like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm giving them the 100% right answer." And sometimes you have to give them like three options. There is no right answer.
yes,
And
correct.
so for you, it sounds like that happened at AIM Solutions. And it's interesting that happened at the same time where you ripped the band-aid off of going from Solomon to Acumatica. And do you feel like it was a similar thing where you just had to change roles in order to fully jump into consulting? Was that
I had to. I think there was no way I could get out of the hole I was in with having to do support all day, but being expected to learn new software. Um, and I mean, if they're thinking of changing, I think that that's the way to go is to go somewhere where you can shadow, listen in on meetings because it takes a while. Learning the screens is one thing, distinct and separate from giving a customer advice.
yeah. Yeah.
I have an accounting degree. So where I'm most comfortable is you want to talk to me about your general ledger, your AP, your AR, your purchase orders, your inventory costing methods, valuation methods, and things like that. I I understand all the screens and all the options, and I understand the underlying accounting. But there is a point where it exceeds my knowledge because I've never been anybody's controller. I've never worked in an accounting department, right? I'm always looking over the shoulder of the controller to tell them, to help them with the system. There's a point where, like, if somebody wants to know, like, this week we were working with a customer wanted to know how to best price their inventory, and I really can't answer that. I answer questions about the software. um, if you ask me in GL something, I would have a much better ability to advise you on something that's not a screen. But in the other areas, I'm finding that it's harder. So if someone was in support, I would look at what is their best area of support. And then they would probably, I guess, be like me, where if they focused on distribution modules, well, then they could easily go work as a consultant. And maybe the first assignment they would get would be somebody's warehouse, right? Setting up somebody's warehouse. And then you start to branch out from your area of specialty and you learn these extra things. And I'm going to call that the periphery of, so the periphery of finance is where I dabbled. I had to be the second on a project. I pretty much hit the ground running in all the financial modules, but still would be a stretch for me. Like e-commerce would be a total stretch for me because I just don't have the experience, don't have the interest, don't have, so I would expect anybody who's thinking of leaving support to just, they have to ask themselves, where are you most comfortable? And are you wanting to stay in your comfort zone on a new software or in a new job? That's where you would start. And then you can decide how to branch out yourself from there. Does that?
No, that's great advice. Yeah, so I think we're speaking to someone who's in support and has considered about consulting, right? And so, picking up a few of your points that you've made. One, I think you were saying that support is harder in terms of, and I think you're talking about specifically the workload, the blood, sweat, and the tears type of harder. But it may be that consulting is harder from a comfort zone standpoint. Most people don't want to leave their comfort zone, and consulting, you're constantly put in situations where you're out of your comfort zone. Would you agree with that? That it's harder, like maybe psychologically in a comfort zone perspective? What do you think?
Sometimes I'm not always out of my comfort zone.
No, I mean the transition
But yes,
specifically. Yeah,
uh,
right.
well, anytime you move to something new, you're going to be a little bit outside your comfort zone, right? You're
Okay,
learning
sure,
things.
sure,
And so, but just for me, I find that the software itself is the easy part, and learning to advise them on choices. Because I mean that goes back to my training too. Is in Solomon support, they told us you never answer an accounting question. I'll
sure.
show you where to enter the debit, but I cannot tell you what account to debit. If you have a question about that, I can suggest vaguely where that might go.
Sure, sure.
But if you don't know, and this is your transaction, you really have to ask your CPA. So I really have always avoided like specific advice that I think is not a system question. But when you get into consulting, is when, wait a minute, you're the consultant. Yes, but I'm not a CPA and I don't know your business and I've never run a warehouse. You know what I mean? So that's where it gets difficult, because there's a blurred line between the system and their business.
Sure, sure.
And I don't have. I mean, some people who maybe were a CFO and then came into Acumatica Consulting, they would have that business acumen that I don't have. And maybe for them the experience would be different because they would maybe work harder to be able to teach the software or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, of course, everyone's experience is different. We're just taking your experience here, but it seems to me that yes, maybe it's more uncomfortable, at least in the beginning. But would you say that you've gotten comfortable with being uncomfortable in situations, or at least you've grown into a consulting role? You like it now. You like the variety, right?
I like the variety. I love all my customers. And I ask for help when I need it. I'm not shy about that. So I think that I'm doing fine. Sometimes I question myself and I'll check in with our project manager. Am I doing okay? I know I'm late on something, but I didn't want to, pressure them.
No, but
It's that kind of thing.
yeah, so your evidence of like, hey, someone who came from a support background, primarily technical, you can grow into a consulting role, and I think that's where I'm getting at,
Oh,
right? This
yes.
isn't like a genetic thing where you're like predisposed to be
I'm
support
not
versus
special.
consultant, right?
If I
Yeah,
can
you
do it,
just
you can
grow
do
into
it.
it. I love it. I love it. And as you pointed out, you get paid more in consulting for doing less work than in support, right? And I think it's that comfort thing. I do think that the consulting side is less comfortable than the support side. You did point out you're always uncomfortable learning new things, but I feel like in the consulting side, that's my take. Do you agree? Maybe
Well,
not.
I think today support is more comfortable than it was when I was doing it, because they do know in
Fair,
advance what those
fair.
questions are. So maybe it's different today, but my experience was it was a fire hose and you were constantly stressed and constantly, stressed out because you don't know what the question is coming at you, and you had to know the answer, and you had to find the answer in a way that keeps this customer happy. I mean, it was hard. Um, Consulting, to me, I have quiet time with my database work sometimes. I like to teach. I like to make people independent. I like to make sure they learn and they can do. So I enjoy that part of it. I enjoy, you know what? I enjoy myself everywhere I go, Tim.
You're just a ray of sunshine, no
I
matter
make
what
a point
role
of
you
it,
go into.
but my husband may not agree about that ray of sunshine thing. In fact,
I
I know he
love
won't. But but I do. I mean, yeah, I'm mostly happy.
Well, fair point about the this your experience and support in the 90s. When you were talking about that, that really sounded more like consulting to me, right? And I, I I think there's a connection between that and like a therapy skill, right? Being able to like keep someone from getting too emotional and but still be moving along and not get stuck. Yeah, I think your experience is much more consulting in the 90s than support is now. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
just
think
just tell your customer, "Don't worry, I'm gonna help you, and
I like that.
everything
I'm
will
here
be
for you.
fine."
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. Well, that's great. No, I love it. I can't think of anything else I wanted to ask you, but what other do you have on your list of stories there? Anything else we didn't get to?
Oh, I do have one little story that do
Let's
you
hear
have
it.
5
Let's
minutes?
hear it. Oh, I do. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. One little story from my youth. When I was 15 years old, a sophomore in high school, one of my friends talked me into joining the track team. And I had never been on a sport before, but I agreed to do it. And when you're a runner, what they do is they try you out. At least in our little school in Kenton, Ohio, they tried us out to see how fast we could sprint. And if you didn't make the cut on the sprinters, you just became a long distance runner.
That was my track experience as well in San Diego.
All right, we have to go for a run sometime. So I was running the mile and the 2 mile, and our school is little. I mean, most of the time there were 3 or 4 or 5 of us in a race, and I was always last. I just didn't have that. I didn't have any background experience about how to push myself, and maybe it's not my nature. I mean, I do push myself to do certain things, but running is not one of them. I mean, I enjoy running, but I don't care how fast I am, I guess, let's say. So I'm running along, and our county meet came up, and for Kenton, Ohio, that was a big meet at our school, and there were about 16 girls running the 2 mile that day, and I was one of them. And so I was running the race. Now, let me ask you something. You're a runner, so you probably know how many times you have to go around the oval to make a mile. How many times for 2 miles do you
4 for
have
the
to go
mile,
around?
8 for the 2 mile.
Yes. A lot of people don't know, so I always ask that. 8 times. 8 times we had to run around the oval to make a 2 mile. And so, during this 2 mile race, I'm running along and I'm running along, and I got lapped, and that happens sometimes, around the 7th lap for me and the 8th for them. But that's fine. So I got lapped, and they continued, and they stepped off the track, and I was looking at these girls, and I'm still just running along behind them, like half of a lap behind them or more, and I said to myself, that can't be right, um, because I still have another lap. I don't know what's going on. Maybe somebody's hurt. Maybe something's wrong. But that can't be right. They aren't done. And so I kept on running, and when I circled around to the side of the track where the audience is, they're yelling Laura at me, "Go Laura." And I'm so embarrassed because I'm 15, and all you have to do is breathe to be embarrassed when you're 15. Um, but I just kept on running and kept on running, and after I passed there, all the girls, I mean, because the first girl had left the track, and 15 or so girls had followed her off the track, and I kept running. And everybody yelled at me. I'm embarrassed. I'm still running. And they got on the track and went round. And when I got to the end, I won the race because they miscounted. One girl screwed up, stepped off the track at the 7th lap, and everybody followed her. And I knew the right number. So I'm an accountant now, right? I count things. And I believed in myself to some level. I mean, there's a lot of like underlying stories in this story. You see where I'm saying? And I finished, and that is how I got my letter. I got my high school letter with that race, and it's something that I take with me. And my father, who's gone now, my father used to say, if your friends were jumping off a bridge, would you jump too? And look at all those girls that jumped off after that. And I'll say that some of the reason that I am the way I am, and that the reasons I do what I do on the community and everywhere else is I just I don't you have to, I don't know what to say. It's a story for you, and you take from it what you can. Is that I believe in myself. I do what I think is right, um, and
And you
here I
keep
am.
going. I think
I
that's a
keep going.
great
I'm
story to wrap
tenacious.
it up with, because
Yes.
the point I wanted to make before you even said that, to wrap it up on my side, was watch out, Naveen. The tortoise wins the race. The tortoise wins the race. It's an
That's
endurance
right.
race. I think,
Oh, yes,
yeah,
the tortoise and the hare. That's a good one.
I like it. I like it. Oh, that's great. Well, Laura, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. Great conversation. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure to be here. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of ogforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening, and take care.